Okay, when we start reading the voice of the silence, we will become quite aware where Madame Blavatsky dedicated is just for the few. Its symbolism is very challenging, but we can find some help in her collected writings, in the Mahatma letters, and some other writings. So in the Gems from the East, we can read, when the silence falls upon us, we can hear the voices of the gods, pointing out in the quiet light of divine law the true path for us to follow. And Buddhism also emphasizes that silence isn't empty. It is full of answers. Right at the beginning of the voice of the silence, there is this mysterious statement that the mind is the great slayer of the real. Let the disciples slay the slayer. And then on page 12 of the voice, it is added, ere thy soul's mind can understand, the bud of personality must be crushed out, the worm of sense destroyed past resurrection. What does this mean? And how can it be achieved? If we look into a dictionary, we can read that the mind is a person's ability to be aware of and experience the world, to think and reason, the faculty of consciousness, thought, intelligence, and judgment. Dr. Vida Penfield, a famous American-Canadian pioneering neurosurgeon and professor at McGill University in Montreal, Canada, wrote in his book, The Mystery of the Mind, that the mind is some kind of organized energy. But although it has energy, we have not found it yet. The mind is a distinct reality and quite separate from the body and the brain. That it is the mind which experiences and the brain records it. In what way can we be expected to slay the mind when it is the one instrument with which we can make sense of the world around us? As we all know, Theosophy teaches us that man is a sevenfold being and every aspect has its distinct function. Only a harmonious interaction with all aspects of our constitution will achieve progress on our evolutionary path. And in her collected writings 12, Madame Blavatsky reminds us that the student who has read and understood the first two instructions knows something more. He is aware that the seventh principle is not a human but a universal principle in which man participates. But so does equally every physical subjective atom, and also every blade of grass and everything that lives or is in space, whether it is sensible of it or not. He knows, moreover, that man is more closely connected with it and assimilates it with 100-fold more power. It is simply because he is endowed with the highest consciousness on this earth. That man, in short, may become a spirit, a deva or a god in his next transformation, whereas neither a stone nor vegetable nor an animal can do so before they become men in their proper turn. And then she asks, now what is the function of Buddhi? On this plane it has none, unless it is united with manas, the conscious ego. Buddhi stands to the divine root essence in the same relation as Buddha Prakriti to Parabrahman in the Vedanta school, or as Alaya, the universal soul to the one eternal spirit, or that which is beyond spirit. It is his human vehicle, one removed from that absolute which can have no relation whatever to the finite and conditioned. And then she asks, what again is manas and its function? In its purely metaphysical aspect, manas, being again one removed, on the downward plane from Buddhi. It is still so immeasurably higher than the physical man that it cannot enter into direct relation with the personality, except through its reflection, the lower mind. Manas is spiritual self-consciousness in itself, and divine consciousness when united with Buddhi, which is a true producer of that production, vikara or self-consciousness or mahat. Buddhi manas therefore is entirely unfit to manifest during its periodical incarnation, except through the human mind or lower manas. Both are linked together and are inseparable, and can have as little to do with the lower tanmatras, which are the rudimentary atoms or qualities of matter, as the homogeneous with the heterogeneous. It is therefore the task of the lower manas or thinking personality, if it would blend itself with its God, the divine ego, to dissipate and paralyze the tanmatras or properties of the material form. Therefore, manas is shown double, as the ego and mind of man. It is karma manas or the lower ego which deluded into a notion of independent existence as a producer in its turn and the sovereign of the five tanmatras becomes egoism, the selfish self, in which case it has to be considered as mahabhutik or a phantom and finite, in the sense of its being connected with ahamkara, the personal I-creating faculty. Hence, manas has to be regarded as eternal and non-eternal. Eternal in its atomic nature as eternal substance, finite when linked as a duad with karma, which is animal desire or human egoistic volition, a lower production in short. In this, I do but repeat what I wrote in August 1883 in answer to a critic in the Theosophist in an article called The Real and the Unreal, says HPB. While therefore the individual ego, owing to its essence and nature, is immortal throughout eternity, with a form or rupa, which prevails during the whole life cycle of the fourth round, its socia or resemblance, the personal ego has to win its immortality. So when and how does mind begin? Cosmic mind appears at the third stage or degree and is confined or limited to the manifested universe. In the Puranas, Mahat, the great principle of mind or intellect, appears only at the third of the 7 creations or stages of evolution. Cosmic mind is Mahat, or divine ideation and active or creative operation, and thus only the periodical manifestation in time and in actu of the eternal universal mind, which is in potentia. In strict truth, universal mind being only another name for the absolute out of time and space. This cosmic ideation or mind is not an evolution at all, at least of all creation, but simply one of the aspects of the former, which knows no change, which ever was, which is, and will be. How are we to understand the mind as a slayer of the real? And how can we successfully and permanently make it inactive when it is linked as a duad with Kamarupa or the desire body? This is beautifully explained in Dr. Burgos' Book of Golden Precepts, where it says, do not kill your personality. Do not annihilate your personality in the sense of wiping it out. You have brought it into being yourself. It is a part of you, the emotional and psychical part of you, The evolutionary work of aeons upon aeons in the past. Raise the personality, cleanse it, train it, make it shapely and symmetrical to your will and to your thought. Discipline it. Make it a temple of a living God so that it shall become a fit vehicle, a clean and pure channel for passing into the human consciousness, the ray of glory streaming from the spiritual or divine consciousness. It is not the fall of the personal which frees the spiritual man. It is the raising of the personal into becoming spiritual, which is the work of evolution. This is the same thing that natural evolution in its slow, age-long process is trying to accomplish. Raise the lower up to become the higher. Be the holiest and noblest and purest that you can think of. Then you can forget your personality, which the body expresses. And by personality, I mean all the lower faculties of the lower mental and the emotional part of you. Your whims and your little this and little that. Salvage your lower portions to nobler and superior uses. And the personal shall have become transfigured. And the personal shall be able to manifest more or less fully the sublime inflow from the God within you, your own inner spiritual divine splendor. Then you will walk the earth like a human God and act like a God. For each one is the representation on earth of its own inner God. And you represent on the physical sphere as much of the divine essence streaming through your own being as your evolution permits you to manifest. Therefore, begin even now to express the God within. You can. And the reward that comes from this is unspeakably grand and beautiful. Turn your gaze inward, not outward. This does not mean to be solely introspective and to abandon extrospection. That is not the idea. You must see in both directions, but do not seek for truth in any place except in the faculty which cognizes truth. Your innermost self, for it alone can cognize truth. With other words, we have to develop that famous link or bridge, Antakarana, connecting the lower self or mind with our true higher self to activate our intuition, which seems to be only potentially in Buddha, but needs a vehicle to manifest itself, which Madame Blavatsky explains in the Secret Doctrine commentaries like this. Buddhi per se has nothing to do with any qualification or anything. It is simply the vehicle of Atman or spirit. Intuition is in manas for the more or less light shed on it by Buddhi, whether it is assimilated much or little with Buddhi. Buddhi by itself can neither have intuition nor non-intuition, nor anything. It is simply the cementing link, so to say, between the higher spirit and manas. Therefore, intuition belongs to manas. Says the great law, in order to become the knower of all self, thou hast first of self to be the knower. To reach the knowledge of that self, thou hast to give up self to non-self, being to non-being. And then thou canst repose between the wings of the great bird. How sweet is the rest between the wings of that which is not born, nor dies, but is the own, throughout eternal ages. Bestride the bird of life if thou wouldst know. Give up thy life if thou wouldst live, says the voice of the silent. So what is symbolized by the great bird? The nest of the eternal bird, the flutter of whose wings produce life, is boundless space, says the commentary, meaning Hansa, the bird of wisdom. The sacred mystic name which, when preceded by that of Kala, or infinite time, is Kalahansa, is a name of Parabrahman, meaning the bird out of space and time. Hence Brahma, the male, is called Hansa, Vahana, the vehicle of Hansa, the bird. We find the same idea in the Zohar, where Ein Sof, the endless and infinite, is said to descend into the universe for purposes of manifestation, using Adam Kadmon, or humanity, as a chariot. Students in the West have little or no idea of the forces that lie latent in sound, the Akashic vibrations that may be set up by those who understand how to pronounce certain words, says HPB. The Om, or the Om Mani Padme Hum, are in spiritual affinity with cosmic forces, but without a knowledge of the natural arrangement or of the order in which the syllables stand, very little can be achieved. Om is, of course, Om, that may be pronounced as 2, 3, or 7 syllables, setting up different vibrations. Now, letters as vocal sounds cannot fail to correspond with musical notes, and therefore with numbers and colors, hence also with forces and tattvas, the different principles in nature. He who remembers that the universe is built up from the tattvas will readily understand something of the power that may be exercised by vocal sounds. Every letter in the alphabet, whether divided into 3, 4, or 7 centenaries, or 49 letters, have its own color or shade of color. He who has learned the colors of the alphabetical letters and the corresponding numbers of the 7 and the 49 colors and shades on the scale of planes and forces, and knows their respective order in the 7 planes, will easily master the art of bringing them into affinity or interplay. But here a difficulty arises. The Sansa and Sanskrit alphabets and other occult tongues, besides other potencies, have a number, color, and distinct syllable for every letter. And so had also the Mosaic Hebrew. But how many of the esoteric section know any of these tongues? When the time comes, therefore, it must suffice to teach the students the numbers and colors attached to Latin letters only, as pronounced in Latin, not in Anglo-Saxon, Scotch, or Irish. This, however, would be at present premature. And as the divine egos, in order to re-become the one essence, or be indrawn again into the universal Aum, have to purify themselves in the fire of suffering and individual experience, so also have the terrestrial egos, the personalities, to do likewise if they would partake of the immortality of the higher egos. This they can achieve by crushing in themselves all that benefits the lower personal nature of their selves, and by aspiring to transfuse the thinking karmic principle into that of the higher ego. We, our personalities, become immortal by the mere fact of our thinking. Moral nature, being grafted on our divine triune monad, which is Atma, Buddhimanas, the 3 in 1 and 1 in 3. For the monad manifested on earth by the incarnating ego is that which is called the tree of life eternal, that can only be approached by eating the fruit of knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil, or of gnosis, divine wisdom. Occult science teaches that the frame of mind in which a man dies is of the utmost importance, owing to the abnormal and psychic state in which he then is. The last thought of a dying person does much to influence his immediate future. The arrow is ready to fly from the bow. The bowstring is abreast to the ear, and the aim will decide the immediate fate of the arrow. Happy is he for whom Om is the bow, the self is the arrow, the Brahman its aim. At such a sacred moment, strong spiritual aspirations, whether natural or induced by the earnest exhortation of either one who has a true conviction, or better still, of one possessed of the divine gnosis, will protect the soul of him who is leaving life. This is not meant, however, to endorse a superstition of a deathbed repentance, for the immutable justice and harmony of the karmic law can only return a fleeting effect for a fleeting cause, and the rest of the karmic debt has to be paid in future earthly lives. And then the voice introduces us to the three halls, which we have to pass through to become one with the source of our being, the sound of silence. The first hall where we wake up in and see some light is that of physical existence, the activity of the lower mind in the objective world. In this hall, we have to learn that the images presented to our mind are mere illusions, not to identify with them out of ignorance and give them false values. The second hall is of probationary learning, where we are entranced by the finding the blossoms of life, filling us with emotions, confusing lust with love, and have to experience the serpents and their poison coiling under every flower. The third hall is that of wisdom, beyond which stretch the shoreless waters of Akshara, the supreme deity, ever perfect, the indestructible fount of omniscience. But there are more obstacles to overcome, says the voice. The fires of lust, which can be confused with the sunlight of life, and the narcotic fragrance of the blossoms of life, which can overwhelm the pilgrim on his path to enlightenment. He cannot find his guru in the Mayavic reasons, the pleasure ground of the senses, the sweet-tongued voices of illusion. The wise ones can only be found in the hall of wisdom, which lies beyond where shadows are unknown, and only the light of truth shines with everlasting glory. Flee the hall of learning with its treacherous beauty, says the voice. It is only needed for learning on the path of probation. Victims have to return to earth again and again until the challenge is mastered. Before setting foot on the upper rung of the ladder to wisdom, the sevenfold voice of the inner God, which is the higher self, must be heard. The lunar body being destroyed, the mind and heart being cleaned. The moon is the deity of the mind or manas, but only on the lower plane. Manas is dual, lunar in the lower, solar in its upper portion, says a commentary. That is to say, it is attracted in its higher aspect towards Buddhi, and in the lower descends into and listens to the voice of the animal soul, full of selfish and sensual desires. And hearing is contained the mystery of an adept as of a profound man's life, as also that of the post-mortem separation of the divine from the animal man. Thus, as we shall find for the first 3.5 root races up to the middle or turning point, It is the astral shadows of the progenitors, the lunar Petras, which are the formative power in the races, and which build and gradually force the evolution of the physical form towards perfection. And this at the cost of a proportionate loss of spirituality. Then from the turning point, it is the higher ego, or incarnating principle, the nous or mind which reigns over the animal ego and rules it whenever it is not carried down by the latter. Impure thoughts have to be watched constantly before they take root and overpower us. Why is that so important? In the Mahatma letters we can read, because every thought of man upon being evolved passes into the inner world and becomes an active entity by associating itself, coalescing we might term it, with an elemental, that is to say with one of the semi-intelligent forces of the kingdoms. It survives as an active intelligence, a creature of the mind's begetting, for a longer or shorter period proportionate with the original intensity of the cerebral action which generated it. Thus a good thought is perpetuated as an active beneficent power, an evil one as a maleficent demon. And so man is continually peopling his current in space with a world of his own, crowded with the offspring of his fancies, desires, impulses, and passions, a current which reacts upon any sensitive or nervous organization which comes in contact with it in proportion to its dynamic intensity. The Buddhist calls this his skandha. The Hindu gives it the name of karma. The adept evolves these shapes consciously. Other men throw them off unconsciously. The adept, to be successful and preserve his power, must dwell in solitude and more or less within its own soul. Still less does exact science perceive that while the building ant, the busy bee, the bird accumulate, each in their own humble way, as much cosmic energy in its potential form as a Haydn, a Plato, or a plowman turning its furrows in theirs, the hunter who kills game for his pleasure or profit, or the positivist who applies his intellect to proving that plus multiplied by plus is minus, are wasting and scattering energy no less than the tiger which springs upon its prey. They all rob nature instead of enriching her, and will all, in the degree of their intelligence, find themselves accountable. Before traveling on the path, one has to become the path itself, says the voice. First of all, through altruism and compassion, by overcoming desire, love for physical existence, by replacing the fleeting with the everlasting, by helping nature and becoming her co-worker, she will reveal her treasures to the eye of spirit. In other words, through experience we become wise. Knowledge turns into wisdom through suffering and pain. Every vice has to be overcome before setting foot on the first rung of the ladder on the spiritual path, which will drag us down again. Desire, sins, and mundane thoughts and all memory of the past have to be overcome by focusing one's attention on the Master, which we already sense without seeing him. Otherwise we are lost. The pupil on the path to enlightenment must become like a child again, before hearing the mystic sound. The golden light of spirit radiates on the disciple from the very first start, but the thick and dark clouds of matter prevents it from reaching its target until the body is passive, the head cool, and the soul firm and pure. Otherwise, the ray of light and its mystic sound is not able to manifest in the disciple. Only when the four senses are blended and ready to pass into the fifth, the inner touch, then it can pass on. But in the fifth state, all of the senses have to be overcome again beyond reanimation. If they are not conquered, they will cast a dark shadow on the soul light, says the voice. When this is achieved, the disciple has reached the sixth state and is now in dharana, the state of concentration. The world of Maya has lost all names. They have become one star in the fire, which is the upadhi or vehicle of the flame. The self is lost in that self from which he first radiated. The disciple has turned into a teacher now. He has become the light and the sound itself, the voice that resounds throughout eternity, unchangeable, exempt from sin, and the seven sounds have merged into one, the voice of the silence. In the same Gospel of Peace, Book 4, Teachings of the Elect, Jesus says as well, "And when the sun is high in the heavens, then shall you seek the holy stream of sound. In the heat of noontide, all creatures are still and seek the shade. The angels or forces of the earthly mother are silent for a space. Then it is yet that you shall let into your ears the holy stream of sound, for it can only be heard in the silence. For as it is written, in the beginning was the sound, and the sound was with God, and the sound was God. I tell you truly, when we are born, we enter the world with the sound of God in our ears, even the singing of the vast chorus of the sky, and the holy chant of the stars in their fixed rounds. It is a holy stream of sound that traverses the world of stars and crosses the endless kingdom of the Heavenly Father, the one law. It is ever in our ears, so do we hear it not. And listen for it. And you shall bathe in the stream of sound, and the music of its waters shall flow over you. For in the beginning of the time, so did we all share in the holy stream of sound that gave birth to all creation. And the mighty roaring of the stream of sound will fill your whole body, and you will tremble before its might. Then breathe deeply of the angel of air and become the sound itself. The holy stream of sound may carry you to the endless kingdom of the Heavenly Father, where the rhythm of the world rises and falls. Enter the holy stream of life, that sound and that light which gave you birth, that you may reach the kingdom of the Heavenly Father and become one with Him, even as the river empties into the far distant sea. More than this cannot be told, for the holy streams will take you to that place where words are no more, and even the holy scrolls cannot record the mysteries therein. No matter how far and from whatever direction we might have advanced on the path of unraveling the mystery of the universe and our place within, it would be a great personal loss if we would ever lose that feeling of wonder and humility, being faced with the grandness of that all. And I would like to close now with a quote by Albert Einstein, who says something similar. The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and all sciences. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer pause to wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. His eyes are closed. And this is the end of part 1.